Yo, what's up, YouTube? Redbird here. Today we're going to talk about Staff Wand DPS. Now, interestingly enough, I mean, obviously, Staff Wand is more of a support combination, but this build turned out pretty good. I actually think it might be pushing like the at least like high tiers of DPS. I wouldn't say it's the best. Obviously, crossbow dagger probably holds that with spades, but this build is actually really good, and I hope you like it. It's a lot of fun to play as well. It's very flashy. It's got everything that you would want in a DPS build. Let's hop in here. The main thing is to note is that this isn't really a burst damage build. Obviously, oftentimes burst damage builds aren't great in overall sustained DPS. So this build actually takes a little bit of time to ramp up, but once it gets there, you are dealing really, really good damage. So we broke this down. Let's look at the skills first, okay, before we do anything. So your primary skills are Serial Firebombs, Touch of Despair, Inferno Wave, Chain Lightning, Fireball Barrage, Judgment Lightning, Touch or Decay Touch, which is obviously like a skill specialization for your Curse Circle. We have Curse Explosion, Enchanting Time, High Focus, Fighting Spirit Barrier, and Thunder Blessing. For your passives, you have Mana Ball Eruption, Flame Condensation, Forbidden Sanctuary, Full of Corruption, Asceticism, Race Beckon, Mana Amp, and Devotion and Emptiness. Now, as you can see here, your passives are basically centered around mana regeneration and damage. Over here, and we'll talk more about like the uses of these as we go into like skill rotation and stuff. I think it's just easier to talk about it as you're casting it. But basically, you're stacking burns and curses, and then utilizing max stacks of both of these to deal like high amounts of damage with Curse Explosion, Fire Barrage, and then Judgment Lightning. So we kind of broke it down, and again, like all of our guides, these are available, or this build is written out. I just finished it on studioloot.com. I'll link it in the description below. So if you have questions or like maybe you want to stare at something a little bit, less movie than a video, that's a weird way to say that. But if you just want to look at a static piece of guide or content, that guide already is up there for you now. So let's look at the specializations real quick. So Serials, Fire Bombs, we basically took the cast time becomes removed. It does speed up DPS. So that's why we took it. I would love to have fit in the mobility thing or the mobility specialization, but we do utilize the spell. Where is it? The passive here that basically says you have to stand still, which is asceticism. Basically, you have to stand still for 3 seconds to get the increase in mana regen and heavy attack. So it's okay to kind of start the fight out and maintain like a static position for as much as you possibly can. During the fight, you actually are encouraged to do so for this passive. So we didn't fit it in. And you'll see why. We're like 1 point away from capping. But every point matters in the specialization, as every point increases your possible DPS. So Inferno Wave, we have cooldown decreased by 3 seconds, and you can use it consecutively. This is big for burning, obviously, and also it just increases DPS because you can basically cast everything on cooldown. Obviously, you want to be a little precautious about the order in which you do that, but most of these filler spells, which again we'll kind of go into the build-up phase versus your primary DPS phase. Most of these filler spells you just want to cast on cooldown anyways because they help you maintain burn and they give you a little bit of extra damage. Chain Lightning, we do this just because it puts an area underneath the boss, which you wouldn't get this damage if you didn't take this passive, so that's why we take it. The spreading doesn't matter. This is a single target DPS build for the most part. That's the only time that really DPS matters in dungeons anyways. So we always focus on that, and then during trash mobs, you know, you're gonna get through the dungeon relatively easily until you get to the boss anyways, right? So Thunder Blessing, this is a classic, a Redbird classic at this point with all my Staff Wand builds. This is our recovery phase spell. It also deals damage while we're recovering mana, so overall just a really powerful ability. This is like one of the key things about Staff that you don't get with any other build, which is like really high mana sustain. So that like that is and it allows us to maintain our DPS at a very high level as opposed to other builds that probably have a lot of downtime if they run out of mana. You know, Thunder Blessing and the Staff passives also give us a ton of regen as well. So Fireball Barrage, we have Fireball Frenzy, which adds a fireball for every stack of burned, and then it decreases the cooldown, of course, increasing uptime. High Focus, we have the damage boost. So basically, you not only do you get the cooldown speed and the movement speed, which we don't care about the movement speed as we stated before, you do get the max damage increase, which is huge for overall damage. I mean, increasing your base damage by 45, it scales significantly with each of your skills. So it's a really good buff. This is only up every minute, but we utilize the uptime when it is up, as you'll see when we talk about the rotation. So the rest of the skill specializations, Touch of Despair. This just basically increases the duration of the curse. We will take utilization of that with Curse Explosion with the durations. So this technically increases your damage as well. We don't take these just because, number one, like the only one we really want is this. And it's a pretty expensive one for what it does. It basically can, like 50% of the time it increases a second stack. But once you get up to max curse, it doesn't really matter if it applies 1 or 2 stacks. You just want to maintain the curse and keep it updated, like refreshing it. So we don't take it just because it's only viable at the start of the fight. And as you can kind of see here when we talk about the rotation, the lead up to your damage phase really isn't that significant because once you get to your cap of damage, that's where you're dealing like all the damage anyways. So just it might save you like 5 seconds to have this, but in the long scheme of a boss fight, that really doesn't matter. Curse Explosion. This is we pump as many skill specializations as possible into this, just because it uses this ability, or it creates a usable form of this ability that actually increases our DPS. I tried so many times to fit in like the consumption of burning and cursing into the damage, because obviously you take a hit, as you'll see as we talk about this later on down the line, you take a hit to damage by using this form. But what it did was it basically reset curse and burning, so like you eventually go to 0 on both, which as you'll see, these actually do pretty significant damage when they're up at max burn and max curse stacks. But not only that, it also takes away the extra damage you're getting from your lightning skills because your burns go to 0 again. So you don't get the chain lightning or the benefit of judgment lightning. So I ended up, I think it's worth it to use all this on here. And honestly, again, other than like maybe this and then maybe movement while fire, neither one of which increase your cap of DPS, it doesn't make sense at all. So we don't even have points where we'd want to spend, is what I'm saying. Places where we'd want to spend the points. So Curse Explosion, we're taking damage or Dark Explosion while damage over time is kept, and that's the important part of this. Cursed Explosion damage is decreased by 50%, which again, that's a pretty big damage decrease. But when you're looking at the overall picture, we're talking about one skill decreasing its damage by 50% versus your overall damage, which is, again, the bigger picture. Decrease damage increase. So Touch of Despair's damage boost by 10% per stack. This is, again, really good. It helps damage overall. And then Curse Explosion changes to a target skill, and the cooldown is decreased. Another really big deal. You can cast this more frequently. And not only that, you don't really, again, use the AoE because we're talking about boss fights. Now, could you, in some dungeons with big pulls, utilize the AoE consumption? Sure. But again, our focus is on dealing good single target damage on the mini bosses and bosses. So Decaying Touch, here we use basically the Decaying Touch passive, which turns Corrupted Magic Circle into the touch. It just makes it a single target ability. And honestly, it reduces the cool. It doesn't have a cast time anymore, which is really big. And the same with this, the Cursed Explosion. Neither one of these have cast times, which is huge in increasing uptime of damage. And then additional damage, obviously we take this, deals damage equal to 260% of base damage to the target when it hits, on top of the applying the curse that it applies. So really good. Enchanting Time, now we're basically, other than the high focus, these are our two main buffs. Enchanting Time, basically friendly targets skill damage boost increases by 190, which is huge, and then duration increases by 3, increasing the uptime of the buff. And then obviously Fighting Spirit is our final one. We have increased our max damage by 83. Again, another huge increase to max damage. We just basically take this, what would be a barrier, and make it a buff. Really good overall for the build. All right, so let's look at the Mastery, Stat Priority, Equipment, and Guardian spread of the build. Mastery, I mean, here is the Mastery for those that like it laid out and simple. This is what I use. I primarily use this on every Staff Wand build that I do, mainly because it is a kind of a pain in the butt to switch Mastery over and over again. But can you squeak out more damage if you manipulate this a little bit? Sure. You could go with Merciless Wrath. You're going to end up sacrificing cooldown speed, which again, not great. Probably like a, you know, one in one hand and one in the other type of thing. And then, for the staff, we are prioritizing cooldown speed as well. Simply because, again, cooldown speed overall is useful for everything you're trying to do with Staff Wand, including DPS. So you want to switch masteries if you switch builds. That's why I kind of go for in all my Staff Wand stuff. So here's the mastery that I use. Stat priority. So again, basically you're going first 40 dex, 40 wisdom. You want to try to prevent double spending as much as possible because, like we'd covered in a previous video, your attributes are extremely important for your base damage, which your base damage determines how much damage you do with every skill. So the more times you double up on a point when you have to spend 2 points for one attribute, you're losing like damage for every time you do that. So remember, if you kind of hit like a place where you can't spend any more on dex and wisdom, it's okay to go back and touch other places as well. But the end goal of the build is to get to 70 dex and 50 wisdom. Is this going to be hard? Yes. You will need BIS PvE gear to do that. But is it possible to get to 50 wisdom and 40 dex without it? Yes. Is it possible to get to 50 wisdom and 60 dex without it? It's going to be very, very hard, and you're going to do a lot of double spending, which is why I don't necessarily recommend it. But if you're 100% bought into PvE, you don't care about anything other than PvE, then go and hunt these BIS builds out because it will significantly increase your damage in dungeons and then eventually a raid or on raid bosses or guild bosses. So I did put together an equipment suite for those type of people that like to do that. So make sure you check the written guide. But here is the spread of gear. Finally, the Guardian. I tested a lot of Guardians for this build to see, and I really still landed on Lady Knight Carmarchia. She is just really powerful in a way that you get cooldown speed reduction by 40%, which is crazy. I mean, you already get a actual butt ton of cooldown reduction, and when you add 40% on top of that, you are casting spells like wildfire, and this Guardian lasts for 30 seconds. So, I mean, most boss fights aren't going to last long enough for you to cast your Guardian more than once. But when you do cast your Guardian, it is a significant boost to DPS. So make sure you're doing that as well. So let's look at the skill rotation here. So the rotation can be broken down into 3 separate phases. One is your building phase. You're basically building burns and curse stacks to their max. For record or for reference, the burning is 10 stacks and the curse is 3. You will maintain over everything. And again, this kind of goes back to the affliction warlock and WoW thing. You will maintain your burn and your curse stacks above all things. That is one of the most important things to do, because a lot of your other extra damage comes from having these things stacked. So make sure even when you go into recovery or into your recovery phase, you need to refresh these before you do so to make sure they stay at max stacks. Okay, so we are using Serial Firebomb, Touch of Despair, Inferno Wave, and Chain Lightning. You're basically using these on cooldown. Whenever they're up, these are to burn both, or to build both your curses and your burns. As you can kind of see here, we're doing that. So once you get to max, which we are at right now, we are popping our buffs and then immediately casting Fire Barrage, Judgment Lightning, Decaying Touch, and Curse Explosion. Okay, this now puts us into a little bit of a respite. We're going back to casting the first 4 abilities at cooldown. And we are waiting for these 2 buffs to come up. Now, once these buffs are up, we go in again. Buff, Fire Barrage, Judgment Lightning, Touch of Decay, and Curse Explosion. Now, we want to go into recovery, but first, like I said, you need to refresh your curses and your burns. I actually let it fall off like a bad boy. I shouldn't have done that. So you will not do that. You will keep them up no matter what. Now, once they're refreshed, we recover our mana by using Thunder Blessing. Wait for our buffs to come back up, and then we go right in to the primary damage phase again. Lightning, Decaying Touch, and Curse Explosion. Okay? Now, again, you're basically timing, and I know I just messed this up a little bit, but for real, we are basically using these 4 skills after using Enchanting Time and Fighting Spirit. You can basically do this 3 times before your high focus comes up. So remember, you're not waiting for all 3 buffs to come back up. You're basically using high focus when it's up, but primarily you are using these 2, and then you're going in with Fireball Barrage, Judgment Lightning, Decaying Touch, and Curse Explosion. Okay, so let's do this one more time. The ramp up with the burns. With our first 4 spills here, we're just keeping those up. We're at 2 curses right now, but maintaining max burn stacks. Still refreshing it, still casting these abilities on cooldown just because it's good DPS. Now we're at max curse. We pop our buffs. Go in with Fireball Barrage, Judgment Lightning, Decaying Touch, and Curse Explosion. Then we really want to go back in here and make sure that we refresh these. Okay? As long as you're refreshing these, the max cooldown on these is, the max stacks should be like pretty significant. You're not gonna have to worry about them dropping off. That way, when you do go in your damage phase, like we are right now, we don't have to worry about the dropping of the curse and the burn. Okay, so again, once I've refreshed these, I just go in, recover, keeping an eye on both your curse duration and your burn duration. You shouldn't hit those. And then you come right back out, refresh curse, refresh burn, and then you're right back into double buff, Fireball Barrage, Lightning, Decaying Touch, and Curse Explosion. As you can see, you're doing an actual butt ton of damage, which we love. You're shooting lasers constantly, which is also super cool. You're doing fire, you're doing lightning, you're doing all kinds of crazy projectiles, especially when it feels really, really good when you hit your main damage phase and you're just spewing forth lasers and tons of lightning and curses. Like, look at that. It's fantastic, guys. This is the end of the video. I've went on for too long already. Thanks for watching. Remember to check out the guide on Studio Loot. If you want to see me stream live on Twitch, I do. Right now I'm streaming Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, so check me out over there. I'll probably be live when this goes live. So, hey, hop on over if you have questions about the guide. And if you do, you can always check out the written guide as well. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.